right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining the podcast. We're continuing our series on education and the impact of technology and AI on education. So excited and so happy and honored to have a very special guest with us today, Rachel Guerrero. Rachel, I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself. But Rachel and I have kids that are friends, and we've become friends over the years. And Rachel had and I were talking about the podcast that we're doing, and we're just kind of had conversations about this topic in the past, and really looking forward to digging into it here, and being able to share that out with our audience. So, Rachel, I'll hand it over to you if you don't mind giving some intros, and then we'll jump right in.
Sure, great. Thank you, Sine. Thank you, Chirag, for having me with you guys tonight. I'm so excited to be here and talk education and all things technology and my thoughts on it. So, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I have been teaching for about almost 20 years. This is my 20th year teaching. I've taught everything from kindergarten to college level courses, and I'm an aspiring educational leader. I'm working on my principal certificate as we speak. So, definitely these are topics and issues that come up in coursework that I'm working on now, and I've had a lot of experience in different colleagues in different areas throughout the state that different viewpoints that I'm learning a lot about, bringing my own experiences and learning a lot about different areas of education. So I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Sweet. Yeah, so let's jump in. I mean, we've been certainly talking about education in multiple dimensions. We've had Jared on talking about the importance of, kind of free form and finding different ways in which to connect with students. Lauren was on talking to us about inner city programs and at-risk children and how to keep them engaged in education. In suburban life, Rachel, I'm sure you have your own set of challenges and circumstances. And one of the areas that I would love to better understand is just the role and the influence of parents, even the board of education, in curriculums. And how do you balance sort of the requirements that are placed on you from external forces versus what you believe would be the most important and critical parts of the curriculum, and just sort of lessons in general as a teacher that you want to ensure you impart on your students?
You mean in terms of technology or just in
Yeah, all
general?
of it, right? So technology, I imagine, certainly plays a role, as well as expectations that others place on you through what they expect, whether it's parents or your overall curriculum requirements
Right.
as well. And then how do you balance like your access to technology, how you infuse that technology into the work that you're trying to do to get your kids educated?
Well, I think it's at every level, it's about teaching our kids appropriateness, right? And how to use things appropriately. And that technology needs to be a tool, and just like anything else that you're putting in the hands of children, essentially, right? Because when we're talking about students and kindergartners now have access to phones, and my 5-year old has access, can get hop on YouTube, and we need to teach them how to use things appropriately, and use it so that it's a tool to enhance their learning, and it's not just something else we're shoving in their face. And I think that's my daily battle as a parent, as a teacher, right? We came to this like post COVID world in the classroom where we relied, technology was everything. We went from being in a classroom and it was like, okay, technology full speed ahead, and then we had to go remote learning and everything was online. And then we came back to the classroom after what, a year and a half of the pandemic, and our kids didn't know how to interact with each other anymore. So we had, elementary students that didn't know how to interact with each other. We had middle schoolers, high schoolers that didn't learn those, important, we call them the soft skills in education, right? The soft skills of interaction and being a student. So I think we're rebuilding that basis in education in classrooms and at home as well, right? Like we don't want learning that fine line. What's the balance between using education as a tool and not relying it on teaching our kids or even raising our kids, right? We're all so busy, and putting our, it's easy. Listen, I'm guilty of it too. I'm in classes and putting a screen in front of my kids when I'm trying to get my work done. Is it's sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but it's it's the world we live in. So how do we balance that?
Yeah, so true. I mean, yeah, I don't begrudge any parents who, if you're out to dinner and you give your kid a screen to get yourself a peaceful dinner for once. I don't begrudge anyone that, but at the same time, I think we do have to be mindful, like you said, of how this is affecting the kids, and making those choices, or making those decisions mindfully, right, and being aware of what kind of uh, effect they're having. But it's interesting you said that the whole soft skills part of it. So that's really interesting to me. And I think Sune and I, being in the corporate world, Sune, I think you might agree. When you're interacting with different generations, especially younger generations, it's not to generalize, right? But I think when you're dealing with younger generations like Gen Z, or the ones that are coming after them that are not yet in the workforce but are coming, there's a market difference in well, I found there's a market difference in just socially, this generation that grew up online rather than in person in a lot of ways. It's very different how they interact with each other in person and how they interact with their coworkers. So is that something that the education system is aware of, or that is being addressed in some way?
100%. I think, especially as I'm doing this educational leadership work, and I'm doing a lot of, looking at hiring teachers and working with new young teachers and how do we keep them in the field. Well, I'm a mid-career, professional, right? So when I started working in 2006, I was working with, I remember, teachers that were ready to retire at 40 years old. 40 years of teaching, had never used the internet, or didn't had never used, or they didn't know how to use an overhead projector, or a transparent, oh, I'm going to age myself, a transparent, right? So, and now I'm in this, it's just amazing how fast things have changed, right? And then, so I'm in this middle ground, and now the young teachers that are coming out now, and they're, even they went to school during COVID. They were being learned how to become teachers. And it's amazing to me that their first year of teaching was remote learning. They didn't know what teaching in front of a classroom was. So still learning that as young new teachers that have only been there 3, 4 years. So I think it's there's definitely a generational gap, I guess we could say, or generational difference, I'll say, between, these experienced teachers ready to retire, and I'm sure it's the same in professional world, right? Like if you're ready to retire mid-career, people like us, and it's just those soft skills of learning how to, or even the work ethic, right? I know when you go to the grocery store and you see like young kids at the cash register, they're on their phone. I'm like, but you're working, why are you on your phone? I think that it's something that's, we have to recognize that it's just different, right? It's socially acceptable for that generation, that maybe it wasn't socially acceptable for us to have those technologies like ready at our hands, right? That they're using it in their everyday life, and it's not so much like a tool, or we didn't have it at the ready all the time in our workforce. So I see teachers with their phone on the hand in their hand all the,
Yeah.
like, you're in front of a classroom. How are we telling our students not to have phones when there's these young 20 something, that have their phone in their hand and they're constantly, using their phone. So I definitely think that that's something that I'm learning as I'm getting older in this educational leadership role.
So how do you balance in a very, I guess, teacher like, as a person that is trying to manage expectations and set expectations for children, what is the right way to use technology? What are the right boundaries for the use of phones? If we all struggle with it, how do we know what to kind of say, hey, is inevitable versus being purposeful and thoughtful to raise healthy, happy, productive, students
Well, I
and
think from
citizens?
Well, at the beginning, there's always policy, right? There's the legality side of it. When you're looking at Board of Education and policies, every district has a technology policy. I know in my district, the students have to sign an acceptable use form. So, I mean, they have to go over that with their parents. So that's the very beginning. But then they're changing so quickly. These policies that are changing from the state. The beginning of this school year, we had AI. information like kind of trickling down from the state that our policies are going to need to be updated in terms of technology to incorporate whatever new tools are coming down, that so, there's that legality piece to it, that they're required to use it appropriately. Their devices are owned by the school, and it's something that we talk about, that they're things that they're looking up, big brother's watching, their things are their devices are not, it's not your home device, right? And there, I think in a lot of schools are, there are programming and curriculum of how to use things appropriately, and like anything you put on line, the it stays there, right? It's like, that's, I think that's the main difference too, of like our generation of being young teenagers. We didn't have that. It was just like something new that was just starting. So these young kids, imagine that everything that you did at 12, 13 years old is still out there in the world. Right. So I think that I'm not quite sure what the answer is yet to that, because I think we're still learning the consequences of that, and these kids, and like the social consequences of it. I think these kids are still, that challenge is something we need to address in the
Yeah.
classrooms, at home, as parents, that they're, everything they do is still there. It doesn't disappear. And I think that's a hard, it's definitely a challenge as a parent, as a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of life, right? That we grew up taking for granted that, you make a stupid mistake because you're young, you're going to make stupid mistakes, but it's not forever memorialized online, like you said, and that it never goes away. Like, I mean, Danae and I did some stupid stuff in college, and I'm sure I'm glad that none of that stuff is on social media. So, I mean, they don't have that advantage of being able to make a mistake and learn from it. It goes to mental health, and there's so many different things, and yeah, it's a really great point.
Yeah, I mean,
And
there's just,
those
it's like
mistakes
every
are
little
what
thing they
made
say
us,
or
right?
do.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, sorry. And then it's important to
Yeah,
make those
that's how
mistakes,
you
right?
learn
Like that's how
from
they
it,
learn.
right?
exactly.
Yeah, you grow up, that's the growing pains of teenage years. I think that's, when we, that's all, maybe a whole nother episode is mental health and emotional wellness in young people, where, technology is such a big piece of that, because I think that these kids are, there's so much that they say behind a screen, and I think that that trickles into the to schools, the what and how they interact, and not knowing social interactions, when you weren't, you had consequences of saying things in front of a person. You didn't know how someone was going to react if you said something mean, or or sad, or someone was going to punch you in the face if you insulted
Right.
them. But now there's just these like internet trolls that just say whatever they want, or the internet bullying. I think that that's also,
Yeah, I mean,
address all the time.
and not only did you not know how someone's going to react, but you got immediate feedback, right? You have facial expressions, you have body language. Like you knew exactly what impact your words had immediately. Whereas now you can be anonymous behind a keyboard and say whatever you want, and there's no consequences. I mean, eventually there will be maybe, but at that moment there's no consequences. So that feedback loop is gone, and that I think that's a really dangerous thing, especially for adolescents who are still developing that kind of that social awareness.
Right. And then like, how much are we supposed to monitor as parents as well? If you're a teacher, we know we only can control so much of what happens in the classroom. But as a parent, how much are you supposed to monitor? Or some parents are so shocked that their kids say or do things, but then you go back and look at this history of whatever they're looking up or searching, or their conversations online, and it's just like, wow, what are these, my kid, I can't believe my kid would say or do that. But
Do
Mhm.
are kids maturing and developing in a split personality? Are they developing their real world identity, who they are in the physical world, while at the same time balancing their online identity and who they are and how they appear and interact in their online personality? Or is there really just one personality that they have and it manifests in different ways online and in the real world? I can't tell. I mean, we have teenage
I love
boys
that you
and
said that,
and
just
I
split
can't figure it out.
personality.
Yeah, I
A
can't
split
tell.
personality, yeah. I think there's just like the general adolescent, I'm not a psychologist, but just in my experience of teaching middle school, but the psychology of like adolescence, and how they're just constantly testing what they can get away with. I think that's a big part of it. But there's something about like this blanket of security behind a screen that they can say and do. And I think that they have so much they have access to so much on the internet, right? If you think about how you monitor your own children, and if you think of those, how many kids are at home with no supervision, right? You turn your screen off, you make sure your kids are off at 10 o'clock because you know they need to go to sleep and you don't want them up all night. They need to get a good night's sleep. And I just think of how many children don't have that at home, that don't have that. And parenting's hard enough when you're a semi decent parent, right? But like when you, I think of those kids who don't have parents or the help at home, and there's no supervision. Think of what they're exposed to. Like you can literally look up anything that you want as a child, as a 10-year-old, that something piques your curiosity, whether it be, violence, sexualities, or anything that's curious to you as a young person. And you're going to find whatever rabbit hole you go down, and there's no one to help you, work through that and see what's right, wrong, what's, appropriate, not appropriate. So I think that they're not learning the skills of appropriateness. Like that's the word I always use, right? Like appropriate. And if we're
Yeah.
not teaching them that, and they're not learning it at home, I don't know how to teach that as a teacher.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah, I
Joe,
think it's
before I
even.
hand it sorry, real
Yeah,
quick,
I was
before I
fine.
hand it
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, go
I can't like
ahead.
remember like movie ratings, like G-rated, PG-13,
Yeah.
like how hard it was to even get access to like an R-rated movie. And your point is like remarkable that like literally there's no
Well,
external filter on what kids
right.
can
So,
access.
Snay, I
Sorry.
laugh that you say that because at school we have like a policy that this kids are not allowed to watch a PG movie without like a parental consent form signed in. So like most Disney movies are PG, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm talking, but anything that they can look up, like think of the video games that they play, Call of Duty or
Yeah.
even Minecraft and like these things that they played. I'm like, this is not PG. Come on.
That sounds like a policy that needs to be updated.
Yes, I think that those are things that I don't know. It's just yeah, like that. I think it's the accessibility of what these like kids that have at the ready, and
Yeah.
is what's scary is what is scary to me.
And I think it's even worse than that, right? Because what you're saying requires a certain amount of intention, and I think we're talking more about the early days of the internet where you could just search for something, right? And but you have to have that intention and that curiosity to seek it out. But now with algorithms, the social media algorithms, you don't know what is going to be served to your teenager. It could literally be anything. There's no control over what that is because it's all hidden behind this algorithm, and that's what I find so dangerous. And I think social media has kind of accelerated that kind of dangerous aspect of it, right?
Sure, it's that self-regulation, right? Like they don't have that at that
Uh-huh.
age, at that self-regulation and knowing what's, again, that appropriateness, or being able to, well, that's why in schools we have, firewalls and everything is monitored, and but it's so extreme now that everything is filtered. We can't even use YouTube is blocked, but we can't use YouTube for education. I
Uh,
can't, my kids can't use I'm a Spanish teacher, so we can't, there's certain translation websites they can't use. So it's almost now it's so bad that they're not able to use tools because there's so much out there that we can't get to the good stuff because there's so much of the bad stuff. So I think, that's, I don't know if that's just the reality of the world we live in now too,
yeah.
the downside of it, but
And how effective are those safeguards that are in place if they do have access to their own personal device that they have full access to everything, right? So, like you can limit to what they can do on a school device, but then right next to that, they have their own phone that they can really do anything they want, right?
well, and that's like brings up the whole conversation of the phones in schools, and that's legislation that's going put through right now, which I mean, I, as a parent, as a teacher, I kind of agree with it, but I can definitely see how parents disagree. I see both sides of it. There's a lot of security issues when you want to know where your kids are, especially as they get older. And I
Yeah.
don't, that's
Uh,
a whole other issue.
that's really interesting. I mean, look, when we were kids, you were entrusted to the school, right? Like
Right.
you
I know
you
where
know
my
where your
kids
child,
are at
yeah,
school.
they're
I
in
know where
school,
my
right? Because
phone when I say, come pick me up.
yeah, so like I don't get that argument, but I understand it in a way. But yeah, I mean, I know there's a big push for banning schools, banning phones in schools. So yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up, and I'm curious to get the other side. I mean, can you play devil's advocate a little bit? And what besides security, is there like an argument for allowing kids to have phones in schools?
I don't I don't know, I don't know devil's advocate because I'm I think more on the other side of it, but
Yeah.
I guess, a lot of parents think it's a privacy issue. It's a personal right, that they should know where their children are, that they have the right to call their parent whenever they want. If they want to call them and they're sick and they want to pick them up, they should do that. I disagree with that, but I think that's also drawing the line, overstepping the boundaries of parenting and teacher, because you have to let the school do its job. If you're constantly overstepping and constantly telling a school that what to do or how to do it in the classrooms, then the job can't get done. So I don't know, I think it's more of a distraction than anything. I think there's so, especially here in New Jersey, security is such a huge part of every school district's plans. And you're talking about, I don't know if security is the issue, the argument that's going to win the having the phones in the school. I think it's more of a distraction. The kids they want to go to the bathroom, get water, and then like in our school we have it and they have to keep it in their locker, so to just constantly go into their lockers to check their phones, and then they have their smartwatches and they're texting each other on theirs. I just don't, I feel like it's really taking our kids away from being available to learn, right? They're not available to learn if they have this constant distraction that's there. How can I fight with that as a teacher when I can't keep a kid's attention for more than 10 minutes?
It's so difficult, your job, in so many dimensions as we've outlined. I feel like there is such a, I don't know, maybe ignorance is too hard of a word, but I'll say it because I think people forget that when kids are entrusted to the school, that they're there to be educated. And I think if a parent has a disagreement on the curriculum or what is being taught in the schools or how it's being taught, I think there should be a proper forum for which parents can raise those concerns. And I think that macro events of mistrust in institutions gets applied to schools more broadly, and it puts parents in an empowered state to then go directly to individual teachers to impose what their beliefs are and what their wishes are for their child's education, with this sort of ignorance of your child is not the only child in this school or in this classroom, and is not the only one that should be beholden to what you believe is the policy, that there should be some level of respect for your child is one of many students at a school. There's a forum with which you can voice your concerns, and I need to get my job done as the teacher to teach all of my children. And I think that people just feel so empowered to go right to the teachers and say, well, Jenny or Johnny didn't get this, homework done because we had all this other stuff going on, and that you shouldn't penalize them for not getting this homework done. Like, okay, like, I get it. The argument that we're not even arguing, but the discussion we're having about, well, I want my phone, like my kids should be able to use their phone. Like, I feel like teachers need a little bit more cover from a policy level so that it's not every day that teachers are having to have a one-on-one battle with parents.
In my own personal experience, my own teaching experience, I have not that's not the majority of parents, but does that change in different towns and school districts and schools? Absolutely. Right? Like you're talking about the culture of a community, the culture of a town, and what the value of education is in that particular area. And it's different. It could be different from where in one big school district here, and our school might be different from, this the school that's 5 miles away. But I think the value for education comes from the culture in the community. And but my personal experience is that has not been the majority of parents. I think that the majority of parents that I have dealt with have been very supportive and very respectful of my position as an educator and my role in their child's life. Have I had difficult parents? Absolutely. But it, like, again, it's not the majority. But I think that, like, again, that goes back to what my point of just saying it's the culture of the communities that I've taught in, where education is an important value in those areas. Does that change percent? I could go to a different town, and that, it's a contentious battle with whatever the school district is doing. So, I think that's where, when you're someone who does value education, it's important to choose where you live and what town you go to. It's something to look into when when you value school, and that's education. It's, how much of your taxes you want to go to your schools.
For sure.
So
Should we jump to forward looking, Chirag? What do you think? Should we talk about what the future holds?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, Rachel, one more for you as we kind of take what we've covered here about the impact of technology, balancing kind of current challenges with use of technology. What do you think the future for your profession holds? And do you think that there will be even more adoption of AI? Do you think that there will be a continued, in like more inclusion or like, more integration of AI technology into how teachers do their jobs? Do you think that there will be a firewall or a pushback against AI? I mean, how do you see this shaping out? Maybe say in the next couple of years, and maybe even in the next decade or so.
I think AI for sure is just like another tool that we need to learn how to use, right? We need to learn how to use it as educators, and how to implement it in the correct way, how to teach it in the correct way. But also, is we're at a weird kind of crossroads here in education, especially, we can't get anybody to come into the profession. Here in Jersey, where we have one of the best education systems in the country, we don't have anybody enrolling in our college programs to become educators. So there's no new teachers coming into the profession. So people are leaving, and there's no young people coming into the professions. And there's a big, we just hiring is impossible in a lot of districts. So I don't know. Does AI play a role in that because we can't fill positions? Is that something that we need to look into? To me, I think that's a scary thought, because part of education is that personal experience. I think when learning is not just learning information, right? It's not just content, it's the experience and the interaction. And I tell my students that all the time. I teach world language. Are these kids going to remember every word in Spanish that I teach them 10 years down the road? Probably not. But are they going to learn the experiences of interacting with each other, and me pushing them in front of a classroom and being uncomfortable doing a presentation? Because those are skills, right? So I think it's not the content, it's the skills and the human experience that they take away from schools. And content they can learn on any kind of, any book, any computer, but it's the human experience, I think, is what helps us grow as people and shapes who we are, and experiences and interactions. And AI can't take the place of that. So, but I don't know, we're at, like I said, we're at this crossroads, and we can't, the profession it's difficult. People don't want to do it. It's not a, not, there's not a ton of money in it, a lot of education and not a ton of money. So, what, bring people back into wanting to be educators? I don't know. That's another crossroads too. I don't have the answers to that, but those are my questions.
So, do you think because of the lowered amount of people that are going to the profession, do you think AI can be a tool to empower the fewer teachers there are to be able to do more with less? Right. So, I'll give you an
Oh,
example. So, I have two ways of two kind of parallel paths I'm thinking of. So, one is I worry about critical thinking skills because human beings are lazy, and I found this in myself where you put a prompt into ChatGPT and you get back a response, and a lot of times it can be easy to say, okay, that's good enough. Let me copy and paste this and send it. But most of the time, if you're really critical and you really look at it, it's not going to be good enough, and you're going to want to massage it. You're going to want to change some things, and I worry if that's the case for me as a 47-year-old man. I can't imagine for a teenager that ease of use of being able to put in a prompt, get back a response, and then be able to submit that as a homework assignment, let's say. That's super tempting. And I have to imagine that's going to be really hard for them to self-regulate, like you said before, right? Like they don't have that self-regulation. I worry about that. The other piece of it though is, we're already seeing evidence that AI, Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, envisions a future where everyone has their own personalized AI tutor along with them throughout their life, and it knows about them and it can help guide them through exploring different topics and learning about things, right? And there was a pilot program in Africa recently, and I was just trying to look up the details of it. But essentially, they found that compared to a control group, that the group that used AI as a co-pilot, I think they used not just ChatGPT, they used Microsoft Copilot. They found they outperformed the control group by zero point 0.3 standard deviations, which is equivalent of 2 years of typical learning in just 6 weeks, which is just an astounding fact, right? That's two different parallel paths that we could go on. But I just want to get your thoughts on what you see. Are you seeing evidence of students using ChatGPT or other AI tools? And have you, while there aren't policies in place, like, are you seeing real world usage? And what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Okay, I'll speak to it on 2 points. So as a teacher, yes, absolutely students are using it. Are there students that want to just get the work done and check the box off and get it done? Sure. More so in our like English classes, well, like essay writing and things like that, just get things done. And I think that's where we're going back to good old paper and pencil writing and like getting your thoughts out on your own. But, again, me as a language teacher, I try to teach the kids. I know when you're Google translating and copying and pasting a sentence or a paragraph of information we didn't use yet or we haven't learned it. So I know the difference as a teacher of what the content they know or don't know. But you showing them as a tool where instead of just Google translating something, here's word reference where you're looking at the words and here is it used in context it shows you the form of the what part of speech it is and how it's used in a sentence. And again, taking the time as a teacher to show them how to use the tools, I think is just as important. And we can't erase it, right? We can't hide from it because it's there. And why not teach them to use it and make them more productive? It's kind of like when the internet came out 30, 40 years ago and it was there and we had to learn how to use it, right? It became this amazing tool that has changed the course of history. So AI is not going anywhere else. So we have to learn. We can't run from it. So I think teaching them how to use it is super important. But so in terms of my daily life, I have found it super helpful in writing. Again, I'm doing coursework, lesson planning. We use it for, on Google extensions, I can just put whatever content I'm using. I'm like, oh, make me a quiz on this content that I have. So, yes, there's a time saving for me and things that would have taken me, or lesson plans that would have taken me, hours to write that saves me some time. Yeah. But also, I'm a professional that has already developed those skills and went to school, and I don't need those. I feel like I already have those critical thinking skills. This is something that I'm using to help me save some time. So, I think it's important, like you said, Chirag, was like building those skills first and foremost.
Mm.
So, like we can't run from it. We have to teach them. We have to learn it, and we have to teach them.
I have a fun question. So maybe to both of you, more important skill for children to learn, to be a critical thinker or to be a phenomenal prompt engineer?
I think it. I think the answer is different for now versus 5 years from now.
Yeah. God, good question. Well, isn't like if they're a critical thinker, aren't they coming up with good prompts anyway? Like, what the
Yeah,
critical
that's
thinking
right.
skills have to go into making the prompt?
Maybe. How do you know if you are a good prompt engineer? No, I love the idea of like, and I don't know that. And Rachel, just to your point of how quickly I think like even in the conversations that we've had on the podcast of, is AI going to replace teachers? I think that has calmed down. Like I don't think that we're in a world where AI is going to replace teachers. Like we didn't even talk about it in this episode. We have talked about it in the past. I think more and more the conversation is shifting to where you went with it, Rachel, is it's a tool, just like the internet was a tool, just like any technological innovation historically has been a tool. New tools come with the fear of it being uh, a threat on humanity. Perhaps this is a technology unlike any other. Perhaps the threat is greater than anything we've seen before. However, I tend to agree with where you're going with it is it is a tool that will be here to stay, and we have to figure out how to use the tool. And Trog, as we're running studies and seeing phenomenal results, how a teacher co-pilot can provide a higher outcome of students learning and being educated. It's super fascinating because I feel like this is where, if we take the current environment where there is perhaps lax policy currently, because I don't think the policy is caught up with the pace that technology is moving, if there's already an embrace of this technology amongst kids as a quote unquote shortcut, like I feel like great teachers will be able to see the world in a similar way that you're seeing it of, well, I'm going to use this opportunity to teach kids how to use this tool responsibly. And I don't know that every teacher is thinking of it that way, right? Like I don't know
Yeah,
how many teachers are embracing
Yeah,
it
I
and
think
and,
it's
and
a
thinking of it that
fear of
way.
the unknown, right? A fear of the
yeah.
unknown. It's just like if you gave someone like a new someone who's only used, Google or Word, and you give them a MacBook and like, I don't know how to use this. So I think it's the same thing, right? But I think of teachers, I think that's the confusion, right? Like an educator, I don't know everything, right? I'm a facilitator. I'm not a dictionary. I'm not an end all be all know everything. So having tools like AI and having I have the skills to find the information and teach it and bring it to my students. If I have a tool like AI that's going to give me more information quicker and easier, so that I can teach, like you said, like bring more information. It's like that I'm the facilitator. I'm just bringing them more information, and that's a tool that's helping me. Things that I have access to that I didn't have access to 5 years ago. I can do listening activities and transcripts in like that would have taken me an hours to do, to type and write things out myself. So just last year, I'm doing activities I couldn't do last year. So I think again, learning how to use it the right way, and that's my role as a teacher, is taking it and learning and facilitating it and bringing that information to the kids. I have more at my fingertips, just like we did, like again with the internet, bringing more at the ready to share with the kids. So I think that's the important part. Think of it, and not the fear of the unknown. I think that's what makes a good teacher, right? This
Mm.
not fear of the unknown, but like taking it all in and say, okay, how are we going to learn it, right? Your teacher should be a learner as well. So how do you learn it? How do you teach it?
Love that. Yeah,
Uh,
that's awesome.
yeah, that's great. Are you finding your fellow teachers resistant to it, or like what's the general consensus amongst teachers? I'm sure you go to conventions, teacher conventions, and all that kind of stuff. But like, what's the feeling? What's the vibe?
I think AI is definitely the buzzword, right? Every year there's something new that's a buzzword, but this year it's AI for sure. I'm fortunate to work with an amazing group of professionals that are, they're highly educated. Many of them have higher ed degrees beyond, their bachelor's or teaching degrees. They are amazing teachers, amazing educators, and they jump right into it. They want to take it, they want to learn, and they want, like I said, share with their students. So we've had some PD, professional development sessions, and my colleagues are the ones that present it. So they're the ones that are learning it. And I only wish that every district or every school had leaders that allowed them to jump into that and share, colleagues teaching colleagues. That's really what makes, I think, great schools and
Yeah,
great bring that is going to, I think, my philosophy as I go into educational leadership is really growing that PD and that sharing philosophy among colleagues. And but in terms of AI, that's, I think, in the atmosphere that I am, they've jumped right into it. So I can only speak for my own experiences.
that's great. Yeah, I think we really need to. make sure it's a tool that empowers students rather than, disables them in any way.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think as the if the social media, whatever we call that, if that was Web 2.0, innovation and adoption, if we can use that to learn as cautionary tales of what the promise of AI holds, yet also the risk that AI holds, we would be very thoughtful. Like we as and that's part of like a lot of what Chirag and I try to talk about in the podcast is like morality and ethics and making sure that we are being responsible with the use of this technology in a way that doesn't disincentivize students to learn and motivate because they see a cheat code to work around something. You talked earlier about something that really like resonated with me of how many parents across the country have the conversation with their with their children about responsible use of technology, responsible use of social media, responsible use of AI. And you probably have some subset of parents that are encouraging their children to use ChatGPT and other AI tools to help them with their schoolwork because they view that as the way of the future. And if the teachers can't keep up with you and you get one over on them, pat on the back, good job, son or daughter. And then you've got others that are probably in the other camp of like, that's the devil, don't go near that, it's going to ruin the world, and don't touch it. And I think to your earlier point, across the country, you're going to have different types of adoption across the education system. I don't think that's any different than the dichotomy of education across our country to begin with.
100%.
Do you
Uh-huh.
see this as like getting better, worse? Is it a normalizer or is it a further divider of trying to, give every American a baseline education so that as we all get into the real world, we all can communicate with each other effectively?
Ooh, I think that this at this point in time and politics and all kinds of, education is such a hot topic right now, and I don't know if it's things that are if it's a topic that's normalizing or bringing anybody together these days, but I think it's just like anything else. It's a hot topic. It divides people, and it's goes back to the culture of what education is in different, it can be districts, it could be states, it could be towns. I think that it's just one of those things that it really depends on the education level and like the value of education in different communities, and where you bring that in. I don't think in terms of AI, I think we're still too early in it. I think we're
Mm,
still too early to see where it's going to go. I mean, it's not going away, that's for sure, but I think in terms of like normalizing it and making it just the everyday, I think it's too early. I mean, that's those things, the technology comes fast and furious, right? So we have to be ready for it. We have to prepare. They change. I think we talked about the last time I talked with you guys that the jobs that our kids are that we're preparing our kids for don't exist yet. Right? Majority of the jobs that our kids are going to have in 10 years. So, we have so now our daughters are 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. The jobs that are going to be around in 10, 15 years don't exist yet. And is that because of AI and technology? What are we preparing our kids for? I know that's always a big discussion. We have to be prepared for the unknown. So I'm not quite sure that question. I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered that question today.
No, but I think that's so true. Like we don't know what we're preparing them for. So I think we have to fall back on what I think is one of the. I mean, I don't know if you would agree, but one of the major jobs of you being a teacher is to make sure we're turning out decent human beings, right? Well-rounded, decent human beings. So many things come to mind there because of AI. There's been a discussion for a long time about the value of college, right? I mean, I happen to think that humanities education is really important because we want well-rounded human beings. But with the rising cost of college, with AI being democratized, and if we're looking at a future where you have a personalized AI tutor that can teach you anything you want, like what will the value of college still be there? Is that an important thing to hold on to? Do trades and other things become more important? Like I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but like just want to get your general thoughts on like how we're preparing our kids for the future and how college comes into play, and how do you see that changing in the future?
I love this conversation because it's something that I've wrestled with myself personally. I'm a teacher. I was a student. School was my life growing up. I went to University of Pennsylvania. School was my end all be all, right? And then I graduated with student loan debt. I struggled coming out of college. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I think that, college is not for everybody, right? There's kids that are going in there, they're wasting their money, they're not getting the full experience out of it. So, but like when we get into things like AI and content is there, like what skills are you going to college for, right? Are you going there because if content is easier and knowledge is easier to access, what skills do we need to teach our kids? I think it just goes back to the what we started the conversation with is like those soft skills and those critical thinking skills. And I say, I tell my students all the time, like it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you can't talk to somebody, if you can't interact with somebody, it doesn't matter what you have up here because if you can't get that out, no one cares. Right? So
Mhm.
I told my students I was talking about go this is me momming them to and lecturing them that I say, "Oh, I went to University of Pennsylvania. I have this Ivy League master's degree. It doesn't matter if you can't talk whatever." And he goes, "Oh, you went to University of Pennsylvania and you're just a teacher?"
Oh.
I said, "Yeah, but you know what? And the most important lessons I've learned in my life or the skills that have served me the most, I learned like working in restaurants, working in as a cashier at the grocery store. Those are the skills that have taught me or served me well in life and knowing those human interactions like I was saying before. I think that those are the skills that we need to be teaching and focusing on. And like I said just the same thing with my own class as a language teacher. My kids aren't going to remember the content, but they're going to remember the skills that I taught them of interacting with each other, right? So I think that to me is 100% the most important thing that we are teaching kids at elementary, middle school, college level. I think when we talk about trades, I think we definitely don't put enough emphasis on giving those opportunities to kids. I think it's very much like our generation, it was kind of frowned upon, right? It was very much you go to college, trade school is for people who are not college material. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think we are not valuing. I think there's a shift in it now. There's definitely a shift in, there's different types of intelligences and different value in different skills. And for sure, that's a change. But we need to invest in tech schools and VOTech programs 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain social stigma there too, right? Like, I was just thinking, how would I react if an educator told me that one of my kids is not college material, and I mean, honestly speaking, I would not react positively to that at all, right? So yeah, there's a certain social stigma that I think we have to get around. That's a huge challenge, though.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and that's as a parent and dealing with a child who has struggled to learn. I had to reevaluate that because I didn't have that as a student myself, and it's really opened my eyes as a teacher as well. And really, the we have to it's learning is looks different for everybody, right? And not everybody's and that doesn't mean college material. When we say college material, why do they go into college for? They're going to college to learn how to be productive citizens, not just to read books and learn material, right? And
Right.
if we get back to Trog, you were mentioning like humanities and what do we want them to go to college for? Because we want them to learn life skills and those interactions and broaden whatever I don't know that just what else we can broaden their horizons a little bit. But I think we have to get away from that stigma. Definitely, I think we have to. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think that's also a cultural thing.
No
It's a
question.
cultural thing in schools when we're in when you're in good districts and that's the value for education is there. But that I think that's also the negative side of it is the push for college and those big colleges, Ivy Leagues and those best schools, that is always the end result, right? But Is that the only measure of success? I don't know.
Yeah. This is so interesting because culturally, we go back to what the immigrant journey is like. And as an immigrant, everybody focuses on education. That was what every Indian kid gets beaten over their head if you're first generation here. And I think it's similar for
I'm
all
a
immigrants,
first
right?
first generation, a college,
Yeah.
my parents didn't my dad did not know what I was getting into with student loan debt, as he was just proud of me to go to college, and I didn't understand that. We didn't know what we were getting into. So I think that that system, it's a broken system for sure, 100%. And it's was, the value of education. You want your kids to have more than what you had, and that's
No
what
question.
for
Yeah.
sure that immigrant, like our mentality, right?
So if we keep going with that, and if the going back to the earlier comment that you made about, like, you went to an Ivy League school and you chose to become a teacher, and if we also take the point that, hey, people aren't going to school to become teachers, doesn't matter which, whether Ivy League school or not, but it's not a profession that is being viewed as a career option for children that are going to college. And no question, incentives drive behavior. So, whichever professions have the highest incentives, have the highest compensations, talented students are going to migrate towards that. I think if we used to consider doctor as one of the top professions for the smartest kids, well, like, you attribute them to, like, they're going to be a doctor. I mean, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think the smartest kids go into finance now. And
Well,
we've created perverse incentives from a societal perspective of what type of a society and, let's say, country we want to support our most talented resources to pursue in a way that's going to give the most back to our country and our society as a whole. And I think we have to fundamentally think through what we do in our education system to not just focus on capitalistic incentives, but rather, what does it mean to be fulfilled? What does it mean to have happiness? What does it mean to be a good citizen, to be a good, son, daughter, husband, wife? And I think that is a part that we didn't get to in this conversation, Rachel. But I would love to, maybe if we could maybe wrap and have a couple of minutes on, how do you teach the whole self? I mean, critical thinking, totally agree. Curriculum, of course. How do you infuse what it means to be a good person into your education? And is it your responsibility to do that?
oh God, Sune, that's such a heavy question. um I think it's everybody's responsibility, right? Like we're all citizens of this country, of this humanity, whatever. Like that's everybody's responsibility. It's interactions in your everyday life. It goes from simple things like opening the door for somebody when you're at this grocery store or walking, right? Like those are things
Yeah.
that is being a human being. That those are the things that make you a kind, normal, you can tell a lot. I say this all the time to my middle schoolers. I say, character is what you do when you think no one is watching. Are you the kind of kid that if someone drops something, are you going to go pick it up just or are you going to do it because you think I'm watching and I'm going to give out extra credit points, right? Like I say I can see all the time. I can see what kind of kids do. I like whose parents raise them to do things like that, or um. So I think that I think it's everybody's responsibility. I can have a conversation about this. This is like a whole nother episode, I
Yeah.
think, because that's a heavy question. I think it's a heavy question and it's a hard one to answer because I feel like I wanted to go back to what you were saying about the profession and it's not lucrative, right? Being a teacher is not lucrative and it's not but it's an important job and I take pride in what I do every day and it's like you're saying does it something that makes you happy? I love what I do. Are there days where I'm like, "Oh god, these kids." Yeah. Waking up and knowing I have a purpose every day and that what I do matters is fulfills me more than I think having would I like to make more money? Absolutely. But I think that's the hard thing too because life is hard when you're not making money, right? This country is everything's just getting more expensive. So, do I want to see my kids suffer if my kids say they want to be a teacher and Do I want them to do that? And I don't know. I don't know if the road's going to be, I don't want the road to be hard for them, right? Is there something that's easier for them, or that's going to be more lucrative for them, or make but I also want them to be happy, right? So I think that's also a generational thing, that we grew up like, you have to make money, you have to go to school, you have to like the and whereas this younger generation, and maybe that's why they don't have that, I don't want to say work ethic. They don't have work ethic, but I think the work ethic is different because they're more focused on finding something with purpose and finding careers that have meaning in it, and it's not working just to work, right? And they want
I
to
agree
find
with
things
that.
that make them
Yeah.
happy. But is that hard too? What if you can't find what makes you happy? Are you lost forever? I don't know. And that I think is a hard question too. That's a lot of soul searching. Like if you're not happy doing anything. I see that a lot in younger people too. So not everybody is fortunate to find something that they love to do. And I'm happy and proud to say that I'm an educator, and to be going into educational leadership. I hope to, to lead the way and hopefully keep people in this profession because it's important. And I think that we do important work every day, and it's definitely, I think it's just an important job, an important, I'm like, I lost my wording here. It's just,
Yeah.
our work is hard and it's important, and we need to, bring people in.
I think as I've gotten older, I've realized how much we take for granted in the pursuit of our own financial comforts, our own financial goals, and our own financial dreams, and the infrastructure that has truly made our country great, um, is by unsung heroes like teachers, like folks that volunteer in their local community and give time to work in, public works, or work in the health administration system in your local town or your county or even at your state and eventually federal level. And I think we've taken those roles for granted, as evidenced by the level of compensation that they receive, as evidenced by which type of people that have talent devote their skills into those types of roles and responsibilities. And even the societal perception, the comment that you made of a student saying, and this is all you did, like your own expectations of going to an Ivy League school and the judgment of you choosing a very noble and amazing profession of being a teacher that is so fulfilling and rewarding, not being factored into that child's perception of what you chose to do with your life. So I don't know. I love this conversation. This was so fascinating. I could probably talk to you for another whole hour, but um, I think we're at time. Chirag, any closing thoughts or any other questions before we wrap?
Yeah, no, thank you, Rachel, so much for joining us. I mean, it was a fantastic conversation. Yeah, I think we could keep going. We've been trying to end these episodes with a quote, and I found a good one. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And that's by John Dewey. So I thought that was a good,
I like that one. I like that
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Might steal it.
It's a great one. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I think we can wrap
Yeah.
it up today.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and you guys, love that you're getting different thoughts out there and having these difficult conversations and making people think.
That's
We're
the
going to
goal.
keep making everyone question everything. So thanks, Rachel. Appreciate your time. We'll do it again. Cheers,
Okay.
all. I think that's the pod.
Guys.
That's the pod. See you next time.
Cheers.